Ever walk out of a voting booth, sticker in hand, and still feel kind of icky? Like, did my vote even matter?
Yeah, I get that.
Well, today's deep dive is next level, arguing we should just skip the whole voting thing altogether.
It's a real curveball, this piece.
Mm.
Takes civic duty and flips the script. The author sees voting, not celebrating it, as the problem.
Yeah, no kidding. The title alone is like a punch to the gut. Why I will never vote again and why you shouldn't either. And trust me, they don't ease into it. From the jump, it's all about the system being rigged.
And not even in a left versus right way. They use terms like Zooey G, deep state,
Yeah.
cathedral. It's about this shadowy system they see running the show, no matter who's in charge.
Which brings up this super loaded word, consent. Their argument is that voting equals rule over me, I guess, even if we think the outcome is a dumpster fire.
It's like we're agreeing to a really, really bad contract just by showing up. And that idea of consent, it's central to their whole argument. They think true power is in opting out entirely, not in that occasional vote.
It's a huge claim, right? I mean, voting is practically sacred in our society. We're taught it honors those who came before us, that it's this precious right. But this article says those are just manipulative tactics.
Yeah, and they don't shy away from it. To call cherished right and civic duty tools of manipulation, that's bold.
Honestly, it felt almost wrong to even think about it at first, But then I started wondering, who does benefit from us just blindly accepting those ideas?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. We can't forget the history, how hard-fought voting rights were, especially for marginalized groups. But it's also key to ask how those narratives, even in a democracy, might be used to keep the powerful in power.
So if we're ditching voting, what's the alternative? This isn't a call to arms or anything, right?
No, actually, they're against violence as a solution.
Yeah.
They want a quieter resistance. Everyone just stops voting.
Like a nationwide boycott of the ballot box.
Exactly. They think it would chip away at the system's legitimacy. They even say, historically, democracies only worked when citizens were seen as a real threat to leaders.
Right.
That kept those in charge in line.
Okay, but is that realistic? Say we all boycott. They're not just going to give up, right?
That's where things get even more interesting, and where they bring up monarchy, of all things.
Monarchy. Now that's a plot twist. Not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when I think power to the people.
Right. It's a bold move, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we're practically raised to think kings and queens equal oppression, right? Centuries of history, all those stories.
Right.
But this author, and get this, they are a monarchist. They think a monarchy done right could be better than democracy.
Okay, you've got to explain this one. How do they even start to justify that?
Well, they talk about how a monarch's fate, it's tied to their people. If things are bad, the monarch suffers too. Supposedly way more than elected officials who, let's be honest, they can break promises and still be fine.
So their argument is a politician can just blame the other guys and collect a paycheck. A king or a queen, they've got to actually care if their people are thriving.
That's the idea.
Ah.
But then they go even further, and this is where it gets wild. They say monarchs might actually be less controlling of our lives because their power doesn't come from micromanaging everything. They use this example of a king. His authority traditionally stopped at your doorstep.
Let's be real, though. History's full of tyrannical monarchs. Doesn't absolute power usually corrupt?
Oh, absolutely. And the article kind of glosses over that. They admit some were awful, obviously, but then say tyranny isn't built into monarchy the way it is in democracy, which history might disagree with.
Right. It feels like they're picking and choosing their examples there. Democracies have led to tyranny, too. It's not like our system's immune just because we vote every 2 years.
Exactly. No system's perfect. Each has its own ways of going wrong. This is one very specific, some might say romanticized view of monarchy. Doesn't tell the whole story.
So is this author seriously saying we should all just bow down to a king instead? Because that seems unlikely to catch on.
Well, they never explicitly say, bring back the monarchy, which is probably wise. Remember, they're more about dismantling ANY system they see as messed up at its core. It doesn't matter what it's called.
Okay, that makes more sense. So how does monarchy even connect to their thing against voting?
Consent, remember, that's the thread. By comparing these systems, they're trying to show how deeply we connect voting to freedom, to legitimacy. Like, we're so used to thinking it equals participation, we miss how it might be propping up the problem.
So by not voting, we're symbolically saying, nope, not playing your game, you have no power here.
Exactly. Passive resistance. Your authority only exists because we say so. Compelling idea, but would it work? That's the question.
Yeah, I get the symbolism, but a bunch of people not voting, is that really going to shake things up? I'm skeptical.
It's definitely risky. You'd need tons of people on board, and even then, No guarantee those in power see it as, oh, time for change. They might get worse, crack down more, or just call it apathy and move on.
That's the gamble with this kind of thing, right? You're hoping for a reaction you can't control, like jumping off a cliff and hoping for the best.
A leap of faith, for sure. And this author seems to believe if enough people leap, it forces a reckoning, a need to rethink everything about power. But there could be consequences they haven't considered.
Like what?
Well, what if most people check out of politics? That's a void, and someone will fill it. Maybe not someone with good ideas.
That's a scary thought. Rolling the dice on who takes over, history's shown us how badly that can go.
Exactly. It's high stakes. And ultimately, it comes down to each person's choice.
It really makes you think. I mean, playing along in a system that feels rigged, it's like we're part of the problem. But then, like you said, just walking away could make things worse. No easy answers.
No, there really aren't. And this is where it gets tough ethically. Because you can argue it's better to stay engaged, try to fix it from the inside. Every vote does matter, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time.
Yeah, that's saying, right. You can't win if you don't play. But what if the game's set up so that playing fair actually makes you lose?
That's what the author's struggling with. And honestly, I think a lot of people are right now. It's not about not caring. They clearly want a better world, a fairer one. But they're saying, are these the ways to get there? The old methods? Maybe not.
So where does that leave us? For people listening going, okay, now what? Especially if this has got them questioning everything.
I think the biggest takeaway, don't just take things at face value. Politicians' promises, yeah, but also the way things have always been done, question it. Look for different viewpoints. Be willing to say, this isn't good enough.
Way easier said than done. But it sounds like step one is really figuring out for ourselves what we believe about power, about who speaks for us, if anyone, and how change actually happens.
Absolutely. This article, maybe it doesn't give a how-to guide, but it's a good reminder. No system's perfect, and what our role in it should be. That's something we should always be thinking about, not just at election time.
This whole deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. I don't know if I'll look at a voting booth the same way again.
That's a good thing. This piece, agree with it or not, it sparked something important. Made us examine what we believe, maybe look for different ways to make things better.
It's like the author chucked a wrench into the gears, and now we're forced to stop and really examine how it all works or doesn't.
Exactly. And sometimes, honestly, that's how real change starts. Being willing to question everything, to imagine different ways of doing things, and to demand better.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with those questions to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. See you next time.